from Hamas and the others. They're saying that this seems
right,
to be
we're there.
They've seen since the war started. So it's definitely, Israel is definitely sending a message that it seems to be fed up with waiting. Of course, even the members of public have been asking when's this going to happen. And it seems in recent polls, people are starting to feel a bit undecided as they still try to find out what the fate is of those that are held captive Israelis in Gaza. So there's been, rumors for days now that there's been a split between the Israeli military, and then you have the politicians, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where the military is raring to go. It says it's ready. It's got its reservists, 300,000 reservists ready. You see them, carrying out minor incursions until now from time to time, clearly sort of testing the waters in north of Gaza before they go in. But what we do now know is that they're saying that they're expanding the ground offensive. So we're definitely seeing a change here where the Israeli government and the military are now keen to move on forward. They haven't said it's a full-on ground invasion. That's definitely not what's been said. But what we're seeing is definitely an expansion. And to add to that, another layer within that statement from the Israeli army spokesman, he warned people at Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, the biggest hospital there, he warned them to evacuate, telling them to head further, all of those in the north to head further south, and obviously Al-Shifa is in the south, for them to evacuate that area. What we do know is that there are hundreds tens of thousands of people in that hospital and around, and it's going to be incredibly difficult. The army also added that...
Right, it's working this time, because I've just checked on my phone.
Hamas is using the hospital as its command center, if you like, but
right.
mentioned by one of the Israeli media.
It's definitely working this time. Right, I'm going to get a copy.
Israel is saying that of those decisions are being made from underneath the hospital, from tunnels. They've even put out a video. They've put out audio recordings as proof, they said, proof to the international community that this is definitely the headquarters, and that they mentioned also that they will go after any Hamas target. Well, it's going to be, really very difficult to bomb the largest hospital there, especially when it really is one of the main ones that people in Gaza are relying on. We're also hearing of some tanks that have moved in, Doreen, and people that are saying that the Hamas included, the Qassam Brigade has released a statement saying that there are clashes, and we're also hearing that there are plenty of civilian deaths. Numbers are unknown because of today's bombardment in the last few hours, but the problem they have is communication now is completely down across Gaza, and the emergency services are unable to get to those people, to be able to take them to the last remaining hospital or few medical centres. So really at the moment it's very unknown territory. Speak.
Yeah, it sure is, Sarah. Well, let me ask you this. How much pressure has the Israeli government been under, particularly Netanyahu himself, to show that they need to be doing something, particularly when it comes to the hostage file, to get the hostages released?
Absolutely, Darian. I think you're hitting the nail there. The fact is that there is increased discontent amongst the public, especially in terms of the captive situation. The Israelis, more than 200, whether it's soldiers or civilians, that are in Hamas. Israeli media has been reporting, again, nothing confirmed from the government, that some senior Israeli government officials had been saying that the government was fed up of waiting, and that on the stagnation was the word they used. In terms of the situation with the captives, what we do know is that Qatar, along with the US as well as Egypt, have all been trying to mediate to come to some ceasefire agreement, perhaps a temporary ceasefire. We had spoken to our own sources that had confirmed that that was something they were working on. And again, there's still not been a result, but certainly the Israeli public needs to see something, whether it's boots on the ground, whether it's being able to bring back their family members that are stuck there back home. They want answers, and we're already seeing that some of those family members are now talking about holding a protest and taking it up another step by blocking roads, for example, to protest the fact that nothing in that sense has happened. I will add that the military spokesman did say that they were still working on the captive situation, but he said at the moment there is no information to share, which of course is not going to go down well at all with the public.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Sarah, for the time being. That's a live picture once again from Gaza, as you can see.
Are we still live or we snapped?
Into darkness, and also we are hearing from.
Are we still live or we snapped?
The executive
Are we still there?
Yep. That they have lost contact with their colleagues in Gaza, and that they are deeply concerned about their safety in another night of unspeakable horror. Because what we understand is that most communication lines have been down in Gaza, or they've been cut off, in fact, and also they
haven't been cut off at all.
Some sort of
they're down because of all the explosions. Because explosions knock the arc out from a cell phone transmitter.
For a moment, because is that where you are? There certainly have been protests taking place in solidarity with the people of Gaza. Just tell us what you saw throughout the day.
Well, Palestinians feel that they can't do much here in the occupied West Bank. They feel helpless. They're not only separated in different and isolated in different Palestinian cities because Israel has been blocking the entrances of villages and towns from one another, but they're also scared because the Israeli settlers are keeping their violence attacks and intensifying their violence attacks against Palestinians. And on top of that, they see their fellow Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip now without any access to communications, to internet, to phone calls. You have many families who are already separated between the occupied West Bank and the besieged Gaza Strip. Usually they can't see each other because when they need to have an Israeli military permit that is rarely given to Palestinians, so they rely on phone calls. We've been seeing Palestinians here ask for family members to just check in to make sure that they're alive. And now even that is not being possible because of the shutdown of the communications in Gaza. So people have took to the streets here in Ramallah as well as in Nablus and in Hebron. In Nablus, there has been confrontations with the Palestinian security forces who have been trying to stop Palestinians from going into an area that
this
has
is what
contentious. It's called Joseph's Tomb.
It causes riots.
Settlers usually come into at night with the protection
phone
of
signals not being taken down by Israel.
Palestinians usually try to deter them from doing so. Sometimes we've been seeing even armed confrontations take place in the area between Palestinian fighters and the Israeli forces because Palestinians believe that Israel is treating the occupied West Bank as part of Israel, and the Israeli settlers can raid in at any point in time and do whatever they wish to do. So Palestinian Authority forces have kind of managed to stop those Palestinians from reaching the Joseph's Tomb at the moment. Our sources are telling us that they've stopped their march now to that area, but confrontations are still going on between Palestinians and the Israeli forces who are in different areas in Nablus, who have been also firing tear gas against the Palestinian protesters. One interesting thing we've seen in Hebron when crowds went out to the middle of Hebron in the center of the city is that the Israeli forces did not even go on foot and arrest or disperse those protests, but they flew a drone on top of the protesters, and that drone has dropped tear gas on the protesters, leading to the dispersion of the protests. So you can imagine how Palestinians are feeling now. They're helpless, they're frustrated, and they're sad, and they're just glued to the news watching what's happening in the besieged Gaza Strip.
Yeah, well, all this takes place in Gaza, and I understand also that the military raids and the arrests have not stopped in the occupied West Bank. If anything, they seem to be intensifying.
Indeed, they have been intensifying, and we've been seeing the number of those killed increase dramatically. Now, when we were talking about the numbers of those Palestinians killed since the beginning of the year until the early of October, we were talking about more than 200
Right, I'm just going to
Palestinians
look.
killed by Israeli forces, which was in itself a number that has been considered the highest in 20 years as far as the West Bank is concerned. But since October the 7th until now, we talk about more than 100 Palestinians killed, not only by Israeli forces fire, but also by armed Israeli settlers who are having more and more access to arms and who are feeling now more empowered, and they feel like they can attack more and more Palestinians. According to the UN figures, the numbers of attacks against Palestinians have risen from 3 attacks per day on average to 8 attacks per day, and we expect that number to increase in light of the impunity that Israel enjoys. As you can see, Israel is bombarding Palestinian civilians in the besieged Gaza Strip, and really not much is being provided as help for Palestinians, or even calls for ceasefire are still shy. So for Palestinians here in the occupied West Bank, they feel that they're scared. They feel that the Israeli forces are raiding left, right, and center and arresting Palestinians. We're talking about more than 1,500 Palestinians been arrested. That's in addition to more than 4,000 at least workers who have been from the besieged Gaza Strip and were working in Israel. And when the war started, they've moved here in the West Bank, but they found that the Israeli forces were arresting them and taking them. And we don't know the official figures. The only figures we have are from the Israeli army.
Thank you so much, Nida Ibrahim, for that update from Ramallah on the occupied West Bank. So let's just remind you of the latest developments in Israel's war on Gaza. It's just gone 2100 hours GMT right here. You're watching Al Jazeera. So the Gaza Strip has been subjected to the largest Israeli bombardment since the start of the war on October the 7th. And Israel is bombing residential areas in the north and the center of the Strip. And the United Nations is saying that civil order has collapsed. The Israeli military spokesman is calling on residents of Gaza City to move south.
Wow, what was that?
As well, and says that ground forces will expand operations tonight.
Wow.
In northern Gaza as well.
I saw that from the bathroom.
He's joining us on the line from there.
I was in the bathroom and I could see that from the flash from the bathroom.
Here in the central area where I'm staying, I'm 10 kilometers from Gaza, from the border of the Gaza City. Anyway, back to the north where the Israelis are intensifying their airstrikes now with artillery. We could hear less artillery than it used to be like 1 hour or 2 hours ago. We have been also receiving more information from journalists in the north of the Gaza Strip. They talk about neutral or exchange of fire between Palestinian fighting groups and the Israelis in different locations across the borderline east of Gaza City and in the north of the Gaza Strip. The latest also came from Osama Hamdan, that Hamas operational base in Lebanon, who said that the Israelis are trying to show fake victory by claiming that they are in control or controlling the operations across the border. He said in the coming hours they will see, and the whole world will see the losses of the Israeli side as a result of the ongoing clashes taking place. And these clashes, we also learned that the military wing of Hamas have been using Hornet rockets or anti-tank.
I'm not going to post the links in this chat. You can get them from the other you can get the links from the other feeds from the other live posts I've done.
That was confronted by the fighting groups who exchanged the fire with the Israelis.
So how do you think this is going to play out then over the next few hours?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What do you think will happen over the next
Is this recorded?
We'll be looking out for?
Well, from our past experience, there will be more airstrikes, specifically in the Gaza City and in the north of the Gaza Strip, where the operation or the exchange of fire is taking place. And normally, when such exchange of fire takes place in any area, the Israelis intensify the airstrike and the artillery bombardment. Now we can hear that they have resumed the artillery bombardment across the borderline and the eastern side of the Gaza Strip.
Okay, Safat, we'll let you go for now. Thank you for that update. Safat Al-Kahlout is reporting for us from the north of the Gaza Strip. Let's now go to Khan Yunis and bring in Tariq Abu Azoum. He's joining us from there, and he's going to give us an update on the humanitarian situation and how people are coping. Tariq.
Yes, the Israeli attacks on the territory continue. Different areas in the eastern sector of the Gaza Strip witnessed massive bombardment during the last hour. The eastern areas of Beit Hanun City witnessed hard clashes between Palestinian fighters and the Israeli occupation troops who are trying to carry out limited ground invasion to the territory. According to the Israeli military official spokesperson, he stated that Israel will expand its military ground operation in the territory. The intensifying amount of the Israeli fire on the territory give a clear sign that Israel is planning to carry out massive ground invasion to the Gaza Strip. Now, the Palestinian fighters are confronting these attacks with different kinds of fires till this current moment. Also, the bombardment continue in the eastern areas of the Shuja'iyya and Al-Burayj refugee camp. Different elimination flares were dropped over the sky of the Gaza Strip, trying to give a clear vision to the maneuvering troops. Also, a residential house was leveled to the ground in Al-Nusayrat refugee camp. Dozens of Palestinians were killed and others also were wounded. The attacks also continued in the western areas of Beit Lahia town in the far north of the Gaza Strip. Now, these areas are witnessing a huge bombardment. These amounts of the Israeli fires are unprecedented, and Palestinians did not really experience throughout the previous conflicts that had been erupted between Gaza and Israel. Now, with the ongoing attacks, people in Palestine and all citizens are very desperate, having such growing concerns that they might lose their lives. According to the current situation on the ground, there is no any kind of internet connection, or no, the phone networks are becoming more available. It's important also to mention that all the signals in different kinds of telecommunication companies in the territory have been dropped due to the Israeli attacks. They have destroyed telecommunication towers, and also they destroyed all the telecommunicational infrastructure along the Gaza Strip. As the Israeli strikes on the territory keeps going, the Palestinian civilians fall. The death toll, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, has risen to more than 7,500 Palestinians killed, and with more than 18,000 others also wounded. This number is subjugated to be increased in the coming hours. Now, medical teams are facing deep obstruction and even cripplings to access victims due to the Israeli massive bombardment. They are having different kind of restrictions on their movements. Not only them, but also journalists. According to the Israeli sources, Israel has informed different international media agencies that they cannot guarantee the safety of the workers on the ground in the territory due to the ongoing bombardments. So it seems that there's no any safe place in the territory as Israel keeps founding more.
This report is live.
Even in the safe places that have been allocated for citizens in the north and in the center of Gaza City. Thank you.
Much. Tariq Abu Azoum is reporting for us from Khan Yunis, that is in Gaza, giving us an update on the situation there as he sees it on the ground. And that's a live picture from Gaza. Pretty dark, as you can see, the strip has been plunged into darkness. No fuel, no electricity, barely any food from what we understand. No water, and of course ongoing bombardments, which have intensified in the past few hours. Aid groups like Doctors Without Borders and UNICEF are also both saying that they've lost contact with their Palestinian colleagues who are on the ground in Gaza. Let's bring in Mustafa Barghouti. He's the General Secretary of the Palestinian National Initiative and a former Palestinian Information.
The reason that Al Jazeera are getting reports out is like the other media channels, they use satellite trucks so they can get it out through satellite.
Reports that there could potentially be some ceasefire and the prisoner exchange deal between Israel and Hamas that was being mediated by Qatar, but now they've intensified their bombardment on Gaza. They've cut communications from what we understand. So what's going on here?
Okay, before I respond to your question, I want to add to what you just said about UNICEF and others that Palestinian Medical Relief Society, as well as Red Crescent and the World Health Organization, have reported the very grave danger of their humanitarian and medical work because of the cut of all kinds of telecommunication and internet. This should be known to the whole world. And it is totally unacceptable to paralyze medical services.
West of Gaza City.
Continue in Gaza. What is happening is
Israel forces conduct raids in occupied West Bank cities. Israeli forces prevent worshippers from gathering at Al-Aqsa Mosque before Friday prayers. Palestinian Health Ministry, 108 Palestinians killed by Israeli forces in occupied West Bank since October the 7th. Israel government, 1,405 Israelis killed in Hamas attacks, including 368 soldiers and police officers. Israeli military confirmed number of captives held in Gaza is 229. Hamas says 50 captives have died as a result of Israel airstrikes. Al Jazeera correspondent Vail Dardosh family killed in Israeli airstrike on Al Nusrat in central Gaza. Al Jazeera expressed deep concern for safety of colleagues in Gaza and holds Israeli authorities responsible for their security. Al Jazeera strongly condemns indiscriminate targeting and killing of innocent civilians in Gaza. At least 25 journalists killed since Israel launched its military offensive on Gaza on October the 7th. For more, go to aljazeera.com. Israel is bombing areas in the north and centre of Gaza Strip and has warned people to move south. So they move south and then they bomb the south.
We will see what happens. But what I care about most is the number of Palestinian civilian casualties. I was in Gaza in 2014 and I saw myself by my own eyes what a ground operation means. In the case of Shaja'iyya at that time, they didn't leave any house in place. Everything was totally destroyed. Every human being was killed. It's a total devastation. And especially that they use not only tanks, but they also use artillery. And artillery's bombardment can be very destructive. This is what's happening, another massacre in front of the whole world. And I ask all these countries that are supporting Israel in continuing this massacre and objecting to a ceasefire, by which law you are doing that? According to which international law you allow yourself to do such a horrible thing? It's so shameful, the behavior of some Western governments that continue to support Israel and do not consider that the 3,000 Palestinian children are also children.
Right.
And the thousands of Palestinians killed are also human beings. And it seems for me that for them, the blood of Israelis is different from the blood of Palestinians. Let me tell you one last thing.
Yeah.
The total amount of bombardment on Gaza now is almost equal to the
World Health Organization and UNICEF lose contact with staff on the ground in Gaza.
Mustafa Barouti, well, what do you think of what's happening?
Israel military has accused Hamas of hiding tunnels and Operation Al-Sharif Hospital.
Non-binding, yes. Do you think it will make any difference at this point?
It will make a difference. The fact that the vote got two-thirds of the votes the resolution got 2/3 of the votes is very meaningful. And of course, we welcome it and we support it and we demand its immediate implementation. All depends on the United States. If the United States wants, they can force Israel to implement it. And if the United States wants, the other Western governments will follow them. That's what that's what we have seen during the last 20 days. So it's all on the hands of Biden, who have unfortunately hurt his administration and hurt his reputation and the reputation of the American administration by repeating Israeli lies one time after the other. And the last lie was that the numbers of Palestinian victims is not correct. And the Ministry of Health has shown with the names of people who were killed, with their ID numbers, that everything was correct. And Mr. Guterres, the United Nations General Secretary, was very clear about the fact that these are correct numbers and about the fact that a true war crime is happening now in Gaza and it should be stopped immediately.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mustafa Barghouti, for speaking to us from Ramallah. Well, the spokesman for the Israeli army says that they will be expanding their ground operations in Gaza on Friday night.
In addition to the attacks that we carried out in recent days, ground forces are expanding their activity this evening. The IDF is acting with great force on all levels to achieve the objectives of the war.
Let's now bring in Sarah Khairat. She's joining us from Occupied East Jerusalem. And Sarah, what we're hearing from Gaza is that, this is according to Al-Qassam brigades, that they're saying that they foiled an Israeli ground incursion into Beit Hanun and the east of Berej, and they're also claiming that violent clashes are taking place. What are you hearing from your end about this reported ground incursion that's taking place?
Palestinian Red Crescent says 10 doctors and 10 aid trucks into Gaza on Friday.
You've just mentioned Israeli media has been
Palestinian Red Crescent, 84 trucks carrying water, food, medicine, but no fuel, entered Gaza in 1 week.
It's war on Gaza. Of course, as we've seen there, the pictures are completely dark. They have been switched off, offline and online. We're very difficult to get in contact with anyone. But what we do know is that they said they're expanding their ground offensive. That key word there is expanding, because they're not saying it's a full-on ground invasion. They are saying that it's expanding, though. We had heard from the Jordanian foreign minister tweeting, saying that this is the beginning of the war that they've been promising, that Israel had been promising, and then Israeli media seem to say, no, that's not quite the situation, that it's not a full-on ground invasion. But define expanding. What we do know is that we have seen in the last few days a few Israeli...
How can you get 60,000 people into a hospital? What a crock of poo.
October 7 attack, but
they've got 60,000 people in a hospital. They've got a basement which has got underground tunnels in it.
A much wider scale, and it certainly sounds that way. Usually the military, what it does is it will release those videos and images later on. It doesn't do it around the time, so we aren't able to confirm exactly what level we're talking about, because simply
if you've got 60,000 people hiding in a hospital, it's a damn massive hospital.
But what we're definitely seeing here is a change. We're seeing that there is a much heavier bombardment from the skies, that aerial bombardment. Hamas and its Qassam brigade have released statements saying that the
60,000 people in a hospital. That's unheard of.
More damage to the infrastructure and more deaths. We're actually hearing as well that there are reports of a large number of deaths, but no one can verify that. No one can confirm that, including the medical services in Gaza, because they're not able to reach them because the emergency number has been cut off and no one can get in touch with those in those areas. It's pockets in the east we're hearing, as well as the north and central and across the Gaza Strip, effectively. The other thing that we're obviously going to be seeing is a step up in this ground invasion. There's been a lot of questions here from the public for days on end saying, what's the next plan? whether it's in terms of releasing those captives, whether it's in terms of military, and certainly there was also, and it's been strong rumours, it's been discussed, and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came out debunking what was reported, is that there's a crack, a split, if you like, between the military and between the political upper echelon, where the military's raring to go in, they're ready, they're poised to move in, and then you have the Israeli government sort of holding the reins a little bit, waiting to see what's going on with these mediations. And that's one of the reasons that have been cited as to this delay in this ground offensive.
What were those disagreements based on? What was that rift driven by?
Well, you have Israel's military that's being backed up by the US, not just in terms of money and aid for its military, which it always has done, but that step up in sending soldiers. You have the 2 ships that were sent in the Mediterranean, and we heard earlier there from the Pentagon spokesman talking about that. It stepped up in what it's offering for Israel to carry out this war on Gaza. So we know that, but the military in itself has also got 300,000 reservists that are waiting, and they keep being told it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and it hasn't happened yet. You have this war cabinet that was put together especially under emergency law, where they can bypass the cabinet, they can make these military decisions. It includes, of course, the Prime Minister himself, it includes the Defence Minister, but it seems there is a divide there as to when it happens, what will that entail. And just a couple of days ago, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a public
Yeah, I don't believe that for 1 minute. 60,000 people in a hospital is nonsense.
Consensus, and again, trying to show that there is a unity in that decision. We've been monitoring local Israeli media to say what they're saying. Many of them have strong sources in the government.
To get 60,000 people in a hospital, you need a damn big hospital. 60,000 people. Good God.
In terms of mediation to get those captives out of Gaza. Then you have the public, Israeli public, that's increasingly getting frustrated, especially the families and the relatives of those that have been taken captive, more than 200 people that are now already protesting, and they've announced that they're going to take it a step further again. That's their plan, whether it's not tomorrow or be after tomorrow, where they potentially will be blocking roads, they said, and step up those measures to put pressure on the government to try and bring back their people back home.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Sarah reporting from occupied East Jerusalem. Well, the spokesman for the UN Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, says needs in Gaza are growing more critical.
The humanitarian system in Gaza is facing a total collapse with unimaginable consequences for more than 2 million civilians. As the bombing intensifies, needs are growing ever more critical and colossal. About 500 trucks per day were crossing into Gaza before the hostilities began. In recent days, an average of only 12 trucks per day have been able to go in, despite needs being far greater than they were at any time before. The Secretary General welcomes the growing global consensus for a humanitarian pause in the conflict, and he repeats his call for a humanitarian ceasefire, the unconditional release of all hostages, and the delivery of life-saving supplies at the scale needed. Misery is growing by the minute. Without a fundamental change, the people of Gaza will face an unprecedented avalanche of human suffering. Everyone must assume their responsibilities. This is a moment of truth. History will judge us.
Well, the head of the government media office in Gaza spoke at Al Shifa Hospital, and he strongly denied Israel's accusations that Hamas is using the hospital as a shield for its tunnels.
The hospital compound is home to more than 60,000 displaced persons, thousands of victims.
16,000, not 60,000.
In addition to the relatives of the victims, along with the representatives of dozens of international media outlets. All this proves that the false allegation raised by the Israeli occupation forces
I don't know how big the hospital is.
They are targeting the medical
I
facility.
don't know how many levels they've got.
Providing a lifeline.
I'll check it out online later.
Well, a team of doctors has entered Gaza through the Rafah crossing. That's on the border with Egypt. And the medics from the Red Cross, they're expected to support relief operations. 10 trucks are delivering medicine, food, and water. The UN and the Red Cross are appealing for the immediate delivery of fuel.
This is the fifth convoy of relief aid. We were contracted by the Egyptians earlier today to head to the crossing to prepare 10 trucks headed to the International Red Cross. Our message is this: whatever's delivered is only a drop in the ocean. We're sending an SOS message that within 24 hours, the Red Cross will not be able to function. More than 16,000 people, mostly children, women and elderly, were forcibly displaced to Al-Quds Hospital. If we fail,
16,000, not the 60,000 that Al Jazeera reported. I was going to say, to get 60,000 people in a hospital would be impossible.
To stop more disasters.
Earlier, my colleague Rob Matheson spoke to Marwan Jilani. He's the Director General of Palestine Red Crescent Society in Ramallah, and he spoke to us about losing contact with his staff.
We're extremely worried and concerned for our colleagues. We have lost total contact with them about 2 hours ago. We are witnessing very intense bombardment, even heavier than in the last few nights, around the hospital. Just before we broke connections with our colleagues, there were also bombardments around both hospitals in Khan Yunis and in Al-Quds. And we're extremely worried and concerned for our medical teams and also for the people who are sheltering in our hospital. 12,000 people who are in Al-Quds City, in Gaza City, in Al-Quds Hospital. So we're extremely worried. I mean, apart from the humanitarian catastrophe that has been happening before the world's eyes the last few days, we are now facing a total darkness. We don't know what's happening. We know there is an intensification of bombardment. There may be even a ground invasion, while there are still about 300,000 people, civilians in Gaza in the north, and the hospitals are still packed with people who are sheltering for safety in these hospitals.
We have been reporting that there has been a trickle of humanitarian aid that's been making its way into Gaza. Has any of that been of any use to the hospitals and medical centres? Is any of it getting there? Are you seeing any fuel that will help you keep working?
Well, with regard to the trucks that are coming in from Rafah, from Egypt, we're responsible to receive them. We distribute them. We started distribution to the shelters. A few days ago, we had some sent to the hospitals, but they are, as I said before, they are a drop in the ocean. They're trickling, there is not enough. But even with this insignificant amount, they're not allowed to go to the north. So they're not allowed to go to Gaza City, to Al-Shifa Hospital, where you need mostly those urgent medical supplies and medicines, to Al-Quds Hospital, to the people who are sheltering there. Nothing is going to the north because we were told that if convoys move to the north, they will be hit. There is no green light or there is no permit to go to the north. None of those agencies are able to go to the north. And as we are the only agency besides the public hospitals that's still operating in Gaza City and in Jabalia, we are lacking mainly, of course, the fuel, which was our biggest concern up to the loss of communications. We are now worried about the lives of our team, the medical teams, the people who are sheltering. We're really scared, and we are shaking to the core to hear all this talk about the war, about the ground invasion, with little consideration for the 2 million civilians who are in Gaza and who have nowhere to go. It is really shocking.
Local journalist Anas Al-Sharif sent this eyewitness report from the north of Gaza as the attacks continued.
We are facing heavy raids from the fighter jets of the Israeli occupation in a continuous manner for the last 4 hours. This has resulted in the killing and injuring of a number of people. There's also continuous shelling and all communications have been cut. The internet is completely cut off in the north of the Gaza Strip. Besides the difficulties,
right, the internet is cut off in the north
places in North Gaza, there's
of Gaza,
in disseminating the
not the whole of Gaza.
in the north of the Gaza Strip. That's resulted in us not being able to show the massacre that is taking place right now by the Israeli occupiers. Medical crews are still transferring injured and dead, including women and children from different places in the north of Gaza. The bombing continues against the civilians in the north. There are many injured. Medical crews are struggling to reach everyone. Israeli aircrafts just attacked a building across from the Indonesian hospital and destroyed 2 floors in that building. There are massacres taking place in northern Gaza. As you can hear, another attack next to the Indonesian hospital. And now another attack across from the Indonesian hospital.
Well, as Israel has intensified its bombardment of Gaza, there have been protests which have been erupting in the occupied West Bank. Thousands of Palestinians are marching on the streets of Ramallah, and Hamas has called on Palestinians in the occupied West Bank to mobilize in support of Gaza. It also urged the international community to take immediate action to stop Israel's ongoing attack. We'll get more on this from Nida Ibrahim. She's joining us from Ramallah, that's in the occupied West Bank. So, Nida, tell us about the protests that have been taking place there in support of what's happening in Gaza. We are looking at the live picture now from Gaza. In fact, complete and utter darkness from the strip, Nida. And also, we understand that there have been 4 Palestinians who were killed in the past 24 hours in the West Bank.
Yes, the protests are intensifying and spreading to different towns and villages across the occupied West Bank. I was just looking at pictures of some of the protests that are taking place in Tul Karim as well as Qalqiya, where reports of confrontations between the Israeli forces and the Palestinian protesters. We've been hearing about an injury in Qalqiya as well as an injury in Nablus in the protests that we've been speaking about in the last hour. As you mentioned, Dareen, it is an intense situation already in the occupied West Bank in the last 24 hours, and indeed overnight last night, we've been covering the news of the Israeli raids to Jenin, as well as other Palestinian cities, including Qalqiya, where 1 man has lost his life and the 3 others have been killed in Jenin. Now, one of those who have been killed has been mourned by the Jenin battalion as one of their field fighters and one of their field leaders. But all in all, when you talk about the deaths in the occupied West Bank, some are, because we're talking about a population that is largely unarmed, some of those who have been killed are just either carrying a rock or have been attacked by Israeli settlers for basically just being in their lands or protesting. So you can imagine the state of tension in light of the growing raids, in light of the intensity of the Israeli raids and violence against Palestinians, as well as the violence of illegal Israeli settlers who have been getting more and more access to arms, fighting against a largely unarmed population here in the West Bank.
All right, thank you, Nida Ibrahim. That update is from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. You can see the flashes there on your screen. That is the live picture from Gaza, where there's almost a complete blackout on the strip, and there is almost a complete communications blackout.
Well, what do you expect with about 300 bombs going off?
Osama, there have been
Oh,
large
you thought it was so dumb.
protests where you are as well. Tell us about those.
Well, as you've been watching those horrific scenes come out of Gaza in the last few hours, thousands of people have gathered across Turkey in sporadic protests. The largest one behind us in front of the Israeli consulate here in the city of Istanbul. People have been coming in the last few hours as they're hearing the news. They're coming out on the streets to show.
I've been to the embassy block in Istanbul. Went to the British embassy there.
These protests have continued throughout the Friday. Let me move out of the frame so you can actually see for yourself that these protesters standing outside the Israeli consulate, chanting slogans in favor of Palestinians, in favor of Gaza, against Israel, and also urging their government to do more. There have been fiery speeches here by various leaders who've been talking about how the Islamic world needs to come together, how Muslims across the world need to show solidarity, not just with words and protests, but in actions as well. And that is the scene that we've seen throughout Friday across Muslim majority countries, where after Friday prayers, protesters came out, showed solidarity, and there were sermons where imams were saying that it is not just protesting in the street that they need to do, but they need to do it with their actions as well, to boycott Israeli products, to come out and demand action from their governments as well. As you can see, it is past midnight here in Istanbul, and the number of people and the chants that we've been hearing here continue to grow.
Yeah, Osama, stand by for just a moment, because what we're showing on our screens right now is the live picture from Istanbul. Osama was just reporting about the Palestinian protests taking place there. And then you can see Tunis as well, Denmark, and Tunis and Denmark at this time. So people coming out in protest and in support of the people of Gaza. Let's go back to Osama bin Javed. So Osama, you were talking about inaction.
Yeah, we're not bothered about the pellets that are protesting. We want to see the bombs.
Happening in Gaza. So what would they like?
We want to see a mass dying.
To do?
Well, they've been demanding that they get involved directly. They stop the violence. They stop the bombardment. They do all possible solutions that these governments can find. And this has been the case.
Right, I'm done for today. I'll see you in a few hours.
From protesters there, they were actually asking people us, even children in the street, that how can you go about your normal lives when thousands and thousands of people are being killed in Palestine? How can you not do whatever you can? How can you still be in your